If you've ever heard this sound on your bike, then this video is for you, right? Is that what you're thinking? Yeah. All right, folks, today we came out to the trails with our test rider, Marissa. One of our bikes started making a little bit of a funny sound. Now, Marissa has quickly grown into be quite a mountain biker with only about a year of experience thanks to her skills and natural abilities from being a pro snowboarder. However, she doesn't quite have the years of practice and knowledge of how to fix a bike when it comes to getting a little bit weird and noisy out on the trails. So today we're gonna show you guys how to get that bike running smoothly, sounding good, and making sure that your shifts are crisp and you're not gonna do any damage to your drivetrain or yourself. While the derailleur was the culprit in today's case, there are a number of things that can make noise on your bike, and we'll address a few of those today since we're here stopped and gonna have the tools out. First, we're gonna take a look at shifting and derailleurs, then we'll take a look at other creaks that might be coming from headset or linkage bolts, and then address braking and sounds that might be coming from your brakes. First up, if you are noticing skipping, anything other than a smooth, quiet drivetrain, don't keep riding. You are definitely going to want to stop and check it out. I've seen a number of people snap chains, bust up their shins, twist ankles, you name it, from continuing to ride on a bike that's making noise because it's not happy. One of the first things I like to do before I start messing with this barrel adjuster, which is going to deal with the cable tension of your derailleur, is always get off and check that your derailleur is tight. This is something that definitely happens a lot on the SRAM Eagle derailleurs that we've been testing on bikes over the years. It's just a really quick and easy way where you can save yourself a lot of barrel adjusting and frustration just to come back here and find that you had a loose derailleur all that time. The first thing you're going to need to do is get your 5mm Allen wrench and ensure that the derailleur is tight. And wouldn't you know it, we are loose. So that could be one of the main causes of that noise. We had about a full turn and a half out on that thing. That is normal. These things do back out. There is a lot of tension, stress, pressure, and obviously vibration in these things. So always check that first. It's the easiest thing to do and could be the only thing you need to do to get you back on the trail. After we've determined that is tight, you can start riding again, see if that resolved your issue. If not, then the issue could be that your derailleur or hanger is bent or that your cable tension is off. Now, Marissa, did you bash into any big rocks, stumps, or logs today?
You know, Drew, I don't really remember what I did today. I was just kind of out here riding.
It's hard to see through all the dust, right?
Exactly.
All right, so if you don't remember hitting something you probably would notice, it's always worth taking a look though. Basically what you're gonna wanna do is come right behind your bike and stare from the gear that the bike is in your cassette down over the derailleur and the pulleys. That should all be in a straight line from the gear on the cassette all the way through the pulleys on the derailleur. If that is not the case, then you've got either a bent hanger or a bent derailleur. Not the easiest thing to repair on the trail, but it can be done if you are cautious and you kind of take heed a little bit to not wanting to destroy your bike. These derailleur hangers are designed to bend and break and give way before the frame does. So it is essentially an attachment point for the derailleur and is meant to be the weak point that breaks before it snaps your frame. If you do need to straighten it, you're going to want to be mindful and not just pull on the bottom and pull it out or push it in, because you can actually do more damage than good. So what you'll kind of want to do is use a support hand, get in here and apply even pressure the way that you need to go to get this thing to be straight and lined up. So when you're lining this up, it's really easy to see in the extremities. So I usually will try to check it at the the hardest gear as well as the easiest gear, because when you're way up here, this gets stretched out and it'll actually exaggerate any offset or bend in the hanger or the derailleur itself. But as you can see here, we're in a pretty straight line, so we're pretty good. I won't bother wasting my time to go up and check it out, but if I had any bit of, I guess, a doubt that it looked like this or like that, I would shift it up, check it from there, and see how it looked when it was in that exaggerated state. Now, let's assume you come back here, everything's straight and in line, you don't have an issue, and it's still mis-shifting or skipping. The next issue to check is going to be your cable tension. Again, that's something that's totally normal, right? Cables stretch as you shift, as the bikes break in and wear, things loosen up. So there is a barrel adjuster, which makes it a lot easier to do on the fly, as opposed to loosening this bolt and pulling the cable in to draw tension down here. So what you'll want to do is try to pay attention to where you're having trouble with that shifting. Is it skipping as you're trying to shift into an easier gear or a harder gear? Is it jumping too down, or is it not wanting to come back up? Those will be identifiers that you have too much or too little cable tension. Now, if you have too little cable tension, the derailleur will have trouble shifting into a easier gear. It'll be hesitant and kind of not want to go up there because there's just not enough tension to pull that derailleur up. Also, if you've got too much tension, it won't want to go down the cassette or into a harder gear. So you want to find that balance where it will go up and down the cassette easily with one shift lever or one push of the shifter. You were having issues on this flat pedal here of it wanting to kind of jump up the cassette, and so what we're going to do is kind of just change that cable tension, and we'll give it about, I'd say 2 turns is a good spot to start. So give the derailleur 2 turns, try to shift up, down, see if it goes away, and then if not, do another 2 turns, shift again, see if it's gone away. And by doing that, you can kind of tell, like, okay, it got better going up, but got worse going down. Then you can maybe back it off again, and then you can just kind of keep doing that back and forth until you find your happy spot. Obviously, you'll want to do this in an area where you're not heavily loading the drivetrain or the chain, so don't do it on a super steep climb. We'll try to find somewhere relatively flat or a very slight incline where you have just a little bit of stress on that chain, but not too much. So let's go ahead and give this thing a little bit more cable tension, and we'll see how that does. So just up here, we're going to turn this away from the rider, if that makes sense. So it would be rolling that forward, and we'll go 2 clicks and have her give a ride, see how it does. So you just gave it a test ride. What was it doing?
It was free shifting.
Okay, so it would just go shifting.
Yeah.
So just as you'd be pedaling, it would just want to skip.
Yeah.
Was it wanting to fall into a harder gear, or did it feel like it was
Easier.
skipping into an easier gear?
Easier.
Okay, so that means it's trying to climb up the cassette into an easier gear.
Yeah.
So that means we've got a little bit too much cable tension. And to reduce cable tension and give it a little more slack, you will go clockwise or towards the rider. So let's go 2 clicks.
Okay.
Ride it, shift a few times up and down, and see if that does it again.
Okay.
Oh! And?
Much better.
No skipping.
No skipping.
Okay, and when you shifted, it shifted.
Exactly.
And it stayed in that gear?
It did.
What do you think? You got it figured out?
Yeah, I'm stoked. Let's
Okay.
go ride.
All right. The next few things that are going to make noise are going to be linkage bolts, axles, and headsets. It's always worth checking stuff out. It doesn't take very long to do, and it will bring you peace of mind. It could save you an injury or a costly repair, or at the least walking out after your bike's broken. Something that I like to check every time I feel that something's weird or not quite right is I'll grab the bike and I'll pull back and forth on the wheel, ensure that my hub feels secure, that my axle feels tight. Next, what I'll do is pull up on the seat. I'll kind of keep that tire down and just lift gently on that. If I feel any sort of a knocking or play, instantly start bolt checking. Oftentimes it'll either be, a high stress like linkage bolt or a shock bolt, all things that you don't want loose, right? That's a lot of movement and a lot of stress, and the hardware here in these shock bushings, it will easily ovalize if you have that thing loose and keep riding. If that's all secure, next up you'll want to move to your headset, check that out, and that's a place where you can get some loud creaks or cracking kind of sounds. Typically what I'll like to do is I'll grab the front brake and just put my hand right around here and just rock the bike back and forth with that front brake locked, and you'll feel a little bit of movement if that headset's loose. Now, if your headset is loose, you're not gonna wanna just tighten that star nut or that top bolt. What you're gonna wanna do first is loosen the stem bolts here. These pinch bolts on the side of the steer tube will prevent you from actually sucking up and preloading those bearings in the headset. All you'll do is tighten this up and potentially pull that star nut up in the steer tube or strip the threads inside most likely. So just loosen those up a little bit. And then from there, what I'll do is just kind of tighten that up a little bit. You wanna snug it, not overly tight. Tighten that back up and you should be good to go. Lastly, one of the most annoying sounds that comes from a bike, brake rotor rub. That is something that happens so often, and you've probably been on a ride where you just hear that chirping sound from that one guy behind you and he just won't pull over and fix his brakes. There's a couple of reasons that'll happen, right? We've been there. It sucks. Now rotors, obviously they heat up. They're a major friction point. It's what slows you down. As metal heats up, it has a tendency to warp. That's why a lot of brands like TRP are going to a thicker brake rotor. It helps manage, dissipate, and handle heat a lot better without warping. It's also why larger brake rotors are great, because they can handle a lot more heat than a 160 rotor. When it comes time to checking your brakes, there's a couple of things that we like to do depending on your brakes, right? Like these here are a set of the more entry-ish level codes, so they don't have a pad contact adjust. Like the code RSCs, for example, do have a pad contact adjust, so you can rotate that and it'll actually open up the pistons and give more space between the brake pads and rotors. So if you've got a slight warp or wobble mid-ride, you can at least give that a little bit more space and room to breathe, at least for the climb. Obviously, the downside to that is you're gonna have a longer pull on the lever to get those pads back onto the rotor when it comes time to descend, but that's why sometimes you can just open it up for the climb and have some peace and then close it back down until you get home and use your rotor straightening tool. If it's really bad, if you've hit something or the wheel just simply won't spin, you can get in there. Any contamination on rotors will get into the pads and greatly affect the braking power. There is a chance that it's just over time, as your brake pads have worn, one side of the pistons are pushing in more than the other. So what you could do is just visually kind of get down, inspect the gap between the pads and the rotor from above or behind if it's on the front, and check and make sure that everything looks level. You'll be able to see the rotor moving. You'll be able to see if one side of the pad's touching and the other's off. And from there, you can make some more adjustments. What you could do is just loosen up those bolts a little bit, just to where it's not flopping around loose, but they are moving. So as you can see from here, I can see daylight on the right side of the pads, and the left side of the pads are touching the rotor. So that's what's giving me that drag and that slight vibration and sound I'm hearing. So I've loosened up these two caliper bolts. It's now free to wiggle, and I'm gonna pick up this back end, and Marissa, I'll just have you grab that brake and keep it pulled, please. Now I'm gonna snug this up just a little bit, and I don't need to go crazy right now to over tighten this. I just want to snug them up so it won't move and make sure that I've got them centered where I want them to be. After you've got that rotor centered, you know, there's only so much you can do out on the trail, but chances are with centering that rotor, backing out the pad adjustment, you should be able to get back out on the trail and at least finish your ride and make it back home to do the repairs you need. That should handle pretty much any noisy, creaky, misshifting, brake chirping issue you might deal with. Hopefully that'll help you guys out on the trail. If you are experiencing any trouble on your bike or get stuck in a group with that one person who just seems to be deaf and doesn't hear their own bike making all that racket. So thank you guys for watching. We greatly appreciate it, and we hope to see you out on the trails.